This is the whole process of me drawing a page in my manga Battle of the Fittest. Wasting absolutely no time, we'll go straight into the time lapse. This is the first page of chapter 2. The title of this chapter is called Duality, and pretty much the whole chapter is a mirror reflection that shows the similarities of both Achel and Thiz, but through the differences in their upbringing. The chapter is already out, so if you haven't read it yet, check out the description or the links in my bio. The link tree will give you a bunch of options. You could pick your poison. Chapters 1 and 2 are out now, with 3 being worked on right now. But anyways, let's get back to the drawing. I worked straight off my thumbnails. I have a pretty decent visual library, so when I'm drawing my thumbnails, I know how I want the chapter to look and play out. I've visualized it in my head multiple times before I even put it down on paper. I have an easier time figuring out the flow of a sequence if I close my eyes and kind of just let it play through and choose and just rotate the camera in my head. This way I've already kind of done a pass before I even do thumbnails. So you'll see I stay very close to what I've come up with in the thumbnails. When I did chapter 1, I didn't use any photo references for the poses. Some mannequin stuff I posed out and then took pictures of, but majority of the poses were just straight out of my head from all the figure drawing I've done. This time around I wanted to take inspiration from my own poses and my acting. So all the poses in chapter 2 have been referenced. It made the process feel much faster because I could lean on the references when I wanted to push a pose or if I felt something wasn't hitting right. This is also the first time you see Achel and Thiz as little kids, and it's the first time you get to see their mothers. I made some character sheets to go along with this chapter. Keeping them on model as kids was much easier than their adult versions. They each kept a similar clothing scheme as well. Achel lost his collar and added some rolled up sleeves, while Thiz lost his long sleeves and high collared scarf. It was honestly super easy to turn them from adults to kids. I already had such a vision for how I wanted them to look. It was just a matter of keeping some design traits to make sure they read as their younger versions. The two mothers both rock a South Asian style, from clothing to looks. This may or may not have anything to do with the fact that I am brown. This series doesn't take place in our universe. It's a universe of its own, one that's fantastical and has nothing to do with our planet. But it's nice to be inspired by the cultures we know. So in the bottom, we have both Thiz and Achel being trained by their mothers. One being excited and joyful during the training, clapping her hands, and the other stern and militant with their arms crossed. Their attitudes towards Achel and Thiz are a major contributing factor towards how they end up as adults. Achel, having been sheltered and loved for his life, never faces any tough challenges. So when he does later in the story, he tackles it with an underlining anger and frustration, never having felt an obstacle he could never overcome. While Thiz reacts to challenges with open arms because his mother did not coddle him and expected him to continuously strive to get better. This unlocked a hunger in Thiz. I've also been considerate of the actions they do at the bottom of the panels to reflect the different fighting styles they have. Thiz doing a flurry of kicks because he's quicker and more agile, while on the opposite, I decided to make Achel do strong single hit, showing he's all about stability and power. It's just made sense for how I've been treating them during the fight in the first chapter. I also have a massive tendency to draw my poses out and then figure out the backgrounds. I would, if you're a new artist or new to making manga, to avoid this at all costs. Drop in a horizon line and figure out your perspective first. The only reason I do this is because I'm pretty good at understanding my perspective and where the horizon line is when I'm drawing these poses. So for me, backgrounds are a second thought, but it's still something I've thought about when I'm drawing my poses. If you start drawing your poses and aren't aware of the three-dimensional space around them, you'll get panels with characters that are floating or even out of place and wonky. It won't look good, trust me. Going into chapter 2, I wanted to really play with depth. I felt chapter 1 was lacking in that sense. If you can see with chapter 2, I try to layer my panels and the things in them. I want something in the foreground, middle ground, and background to really give the audience the sense of space between environments, objects, and characters. Reviewing the time-lapse back, I can even critique myself and say that the mothers in the bottom panels could have been a little larger in frame. Right now they kind of occupy the same size as the characters. They're definitely in the foreground, but I could have pushed that and really brought them towards the camera. It's honestly great to be self-critical and be able to find areas you can improve on for the next time you tackle a new project or chapter. Working in animation, you're consistently getting feedback from directors and leads. You have to learn to have thick skin and not get attached to your work. Learning to take criticism is vital for your artistic growth. Don't just ask your parents. They're objectively obligated to say your work is amazing and incredible. It's gonna be hella biased. I follow a pretty straight ahead process where I do roughs, clean roughs, inking, backgrounds, and then screen tones. I've never been one for sound effects, so I've omitted them from my series. They tend to be invisible to me anyways when I read manga, and if they're not, they're overly distracting. Maybe I just need to practice them and make compositions around them, but that could be for another project. I haven't mentioned this before, but I ink my manga in a very unconventional way. Generally, I draw and ink, I'll be mindful of line weight and making tapering lines. This is to add a bit of emphasis and overall appeal to the line art. I've made a video about it called Sketching and Inking for Beginner Artists, and I totally go against my own tellings in that video. I've specifically done it as a stylistic choice. I was at the time getting very into clean TV anime line art and kinda thought it'd be nice to make a manga like that. The biggest hurdle with making line art like this is to make sure I can emphasize and draw the viewer's eye to the most important parts and not have the characters blend in with the background. I'll add like little spots of black in the T sections to make the characters pop here and there. But yeah, if you look closely, I have no line weight. It's all just one size. The first chapter didn't have any building, so I was free to just wing the perspectives because it was more organic shapes like mountains, rocks, and trees. I didn't have to be too accurate. I gathered some references from Indian and Chinese architecture and kind of just meshed them together to make a few building designs that I thought were appealing. I had the chapter planned out and knew I wouldn't need to make full establishing shots, so I had a loose sense of what the location was gonna look like, and this was kind of enough detail that I needed. It still gives you that Asian vibe. I really enjoyed drawing backgrounds. There's something structural about the process where you just follow perspective lines and you don't have to worry too much. And once you kind of get the basics, you can go on autopilot. It's also just so rewarding and kind of therapeutic adding in all the little details in the background. Once you see your panels being populated and your characters occupying that space, nothing feels as good. But I will admit, with these first two chapters, I went with locations and backgrounds that I could easily do without much effort. Backgrounds aren't my strong point, so I wanted to start off with something manageable and slowly build my confidence in drawing them. I am getting better, sort of, but we'll see once I'm like 4 to 5 chapters in, or once the story starts moving to a different location. Screen tones are so tedious and not a fun part of the process for me, but they can help push and pull areas of the comic and help control the eye with contrast, so it's gotta be done. I keep it pretty simple, don't go heavy with the tones at all. I started using some specific values in chapter 1, so I've tried to carry them over for chapter 2. I wasn't very proud of chapter 1 when it came to the screen tones, but I think I did a much better job on chapter 2. I mentioned before about layering, and putting the mother in complete shadow helps break up that foreground and middle ground. It's not the perfect fix, but you know what, at least I was mindful to do that at the end. With that, page 1 of chapter 2 is complete. If you had any burning questions about the process or just enjoyed the video, leave a comment below. It's very much appreciated. Again, if you've watched it all the way to the end and haven't read the chapter, the links are in my description and bio. If you've enjoyed this video, you already know what to do. But that's enough of me yapping. See you on the next one.